What's up there, Workforce? Chris here with Work to Game, and this time we are going to have some in-game footage because this is the second part of the series where we talk about what class should you play in World of Warcraft. If you missed the first one, what it is about is defining the roles. So if you don't know terms like tank, healer, DPS, what their jobs are, and all of that, then really that's not going to give enough, you're not going to have enough context for this video. So I would go back and watch that one and then come back here, because now we're going to jump in and we're going to talk about the different classes that are available, where you find out what their role is, and how you help really start steering down exactly what the classes offer and what the different styles of play may be. Now I'm going to start at the top on the right here, and the first thing I want to say is this video is not talking about what class is the best as of the date you watch this. This is a lot longer thinking than that. World of Warcraft, one of the reasons people come to MMOs is that the game is ever changing, ever updating. I have been playing this game since 2004. I took a break, I came back, classes change, content changes, and so instead of talking about which class or which spec is the best DPS today, instead we're going to talk more about how you pick one that you can stick with, either as one of a few characters or one of a few specs on a character, or one that's just a main. Heaven or high, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to play this no matter what. Like, I have always mained a druid when I played Horde, and always mained a hunter when I played Alliance, regardless of which class was on top. I've just stuck with it. Now, that does mean that sometimes during various content patches at endgame, that the number of that class that people want to bring shifts, but there's a lot of ways to level alternative characters for the people that want to do that. So typically I found if you're willing to kind of be patient, that there's always somebody that will take you, especially if you're doing anything below the very, very highest level of play, that mythic level of play. Anything heroic and below, M pluses and so on. I don't know if those terms mean anything to you yet. There is a huge amount of content available for you, no matter what decision you make after watching this series of videos. Now, this is going to be part 2 in the series, and this is going to be a big overview into what the classes are and how you just read the screen when you are deciding. So first we're jumping on warrior. Now, as you click through these different roles here, you see some are grayed out. If you didn't watch my how to pick a race thing, that is because only some races can be some classes. You don't see that many Paladin options on Horde. Horde didn't originally have access to Paladin, so that's probably why. So warrior here, you'll see the first thing you notice is when you click on these different things, it tells you what role. That role that we just talked about, tank, melee damage, right? We jump down to hunter, ranged, melee damage. So the first thing you want to know is that every class has more than one spec or specialization. Some of them have 3, like Druid, for example, has 4, but this is going to tell you within those specs what jobs are capable of being done within the party. So being a tank or melee damage all the time means warriors first and foremost are always going to be up close and personal. You're never going to have a warrior sitting 20, 30, 40 yards back, you know, just shooting things at them. They are always going to be right up where the action is. So if that doesn't sound like something that interests you, it means being a melee DPS and tank means things like position are incredibly important and update often. Tank abilities mean that, you know, you're going to be taking the hits, and so you're going to have a lot of defensive cooldowns and things like that you need to pay attention for tanking in general. And then melee damage is oftentimes very fast-paced feeling, in my opinion, than ranged, and so you really are just trying to stay in the action and stay optimally positioned to continue doing what's called your rotation, the order of your abilities kind of in their optimal order. It's not, you know, so after this ability I always try to get this and then this. So as you're paying attention to your skill rotation, trying to put out the most damage that you can, you're going to need to pay attention to where you're standing, because if the tank moves whatever you're attacking, you're going to need to move too. So you're going to have very heavy armor. You can see a little bit by how it's rendered kind of what things look like. You can Google warrior WoW and get a ton of images if your sole goal here is appearance. But just know that there's an enormous appearance adjustment kind of system called transmogrification, where you can make your armor look like armor that it's not. And so you have the ability to kind of adjust appearance if you ever end up in an armor set that just doesn't do it for you within kind of some rule sets. Not the place to talk about it. The other thing I want to point out is up here at the top, there is the class trial. You can try it out. It's time-based. Of course, at the end of that, they're going to say, hey, if you buy a boost potion, you can jump to the top. And so you can immediately kind of level that character up. Playing it at 110, the current class cap is 120, but playing at 100, 110, and 120 for a limited amount of time, all of them, the number of skills and stuff, it really is a consistent experience. I think the class trials is a great thing, and I recommend that you try at least one of these out before selecting your very first character or an alt that you know you're going to want to spend a ton of time on if you're not somebody that plans on leveling all these classes eventually. You can level more than one class on a server, but most people center on one, so this decision is very important, but it is not permanent. You can always come back and shift. I think I'm not going to play that character as much anymore. No big deal. Now, the next class we're going to talk about is another what's called plate wearer. If we categorize these guys by the type of armor they wear, warriors wear plate. That is the heaviest armor there is. And then paladins also wear plate, but paladins are a little bit different. Paladins here, if we kind of, look at these, paladins are plate wearers, but they can be tanks, healers, or melee DPS. They have a huge amount of variety for somebody that wears such a heavy armor type. You have paladin healers, you have paladin tanks, and you have paladin melee DPS. Now, next video, I'd like to dive a little bit more into what these different specs may mean, but if this video is enough, then go nuts. Paladin is hugely flexible. It is one of the very few jobs that can fulfill every one of the 3 roles within a party formation. They can put out the damage, they can heal, and they can tank. And currently in World of Warcraft, there has been a system implemented where once you get a piece of gear, say when you're a healer, the #1 primary stat you're looking for is intellect to make your healing more powerful. Very D&D of them. Then if you need strength for your tank in that class, so that they're nice and big and strong, those will swap automatically when you change specs. So there is an inactive primary stat that can change. So it is very easy to, at least at a basic level, jump between these roles if you want to guarantee that you have the 2 fastest wait times in the game and still have a DPS to try on the side. Paladin may be the class for you. Hunter here is always been range DPS until relatively recently, where they've added melee DPS. Hunter, what it doesn't show here is you see this wolf. If we jump over to orc, it changes to a pig. There's a ton of pet options. You have a pet. That pet can be a varying role of importance to you. All the way up to, at various expansions, Beastmaster has been one of the top DPS specs for Hunter. So definitely an option where you kind of focus on this pet-heavy build, but otherwise you are always doing damage. Always, always, always. It is just a question of, are you going to be ranged or are you going to be melee? We move on to Rogue. Rogues are all about stealth. They're quick. Hunters wear mail. That's 1 step below plate. They wear leather when they're real low level, and they move to mail later. And then rogues wear leather all the time. And so they're very quick on their feet, lots of dodging. The sample ability, for example, being cheap shot. In PvP, these guys come up behind you, you don't know they're behind you, and then they knock you out from behind, and they just go to town on you. They are very much the assassins, the ninjas, the people that are just trying to get in there and get a cheap shot off and then bail. A lot of times they jump out of combat. In PvE, they're very fast attacking. They have some neat utility things like unlocking lock boxes and stuff. So definitely the ability to pickpocket and things like that, if that's the kind of play that you're looking for. Now the next is Priest. If we kind of move to Priest, we do have quite a few options on what class can play Priest. It could possibly be all of them. And so Priest is going to be a healer or a ranged DPS. So are you going to be hitting them with shadow magic, or are you going to be healing your party from, I believe they have 2 healing specs as of this video recording, but specs have changed over the years, at least a little bit, not a ton. So you have different kinds of healing. You're looking at things like shields and all of that. It is a very heavy mana class. They are a cloth wearer. That is our lowest of our 4 armor types. And so you're really looking to not necessarily get hit a whole lot. Priests are unique in that they're one of the few classes in this game that doesn't really have a way to move very quickly. So a lot of times playing a priest feels a little more slow and a little more intentional in where you run. And then the next class we move to was the Horde only original class Shamans. And so we'll start showing some male models here. So Shamans are now playable on humans as well. So like dwarves, for example, can be Shamans, and these are going to have the different elements. That makes sense. And they can play as a healer with things like Chain Heal. They can play as ranged damage called Elemental, which is exactly what it sounds like, with things like Chain Lightning, and they can summon a big elemental to come taking damage for them and stuff like that. They can also be melee enhancement. And so, you know, there is a ton of option there. They have quite a bit of flexibility as long as you don't want to be a tank. So definitely kind of consider that. You have things like totems and all this stuff going on. Elemental has consistently, over the course of at least my experience, I've always thought of it as one of the most complex range DPS rotations out there. So definitely something that if you're looking for that kind of depth and things like that, though the game has been simplified to where a basic version of all the rotations is available to you, you can play. But when you start talking about mythic level players that are maximizing, there is a ton of depth there where you can say, oh, actually in this situation, you might want to change the order of these abilities and things like that. Mage. Another cloth wearer, very, very soft, very much a glass cannon. They put out a ton of damage. They are always range DPS. It's just a question of what kind of mage do you want to be. They do still have multiple specs, but you were looking at range DPS, range DPS, range DPS. So if you're always trying to stay optimal within a mage and play the one that happens to be either what your raid group needs, or if there's one that's just outshining the others in a particular expansion, you're always going to be kind of playing that spec. But you're always going to be a range DPS in cloth. But one of the coolest utility things in the game is the ability to toss up free food and drink for fellow adventurers, or free portals to take you places. And those are two things that I've always admired about mages that are not combat specific, that I just think is really cool. So Blink is one of their sample abilities here. That's the ability to teleport to something else. So these sample abilities do kind of give you a better feel for the flavor within a class. Keep in mind that class trial is incredibly important. Now, this video is already running long, which is why I'm going to break down another one. Warlock is another, I think of it a lot like a mage, but whereas a mage hits really hard on the front end and just boom, smack, you have a lot more things like drain life and what's called dots, damage over time, things like that on a Warlock, where they can kind of put on like poison type abilities where something takes damage over time. That's not, they're very similar classes. So if you're between these two, class trial it up for sure. Monk is one of our newer classes. I think it was added in Pandaria, and so Monk. My Monk is a Pandarian. So the Monk is another one of those classes that can play as a tank, a healer, or a melee DPS. It is incredibly fast moving and very, very fun to play. So I definitely would kind of think about this if you're somebody that wants to guarantee that you're not pigeonholed into a certain role, because you're not sure which role is going to work out for you in all content. Like maybe I'd like to casually tank and I'd like to heal in PvP, but I want a DPS when I get into a raid group where there's just a lot going on, or that's what the group needs more of that I'm playing with. They already have tanks and healers. Monk is an incredibly good option there. They're fast, light on their feet. They move quick, but they're not stealthy like a rogue. This guy, as you can see, he's kind of up in your face. So druids, I play a Tauren druid. Druids are shapeshifters, so basically you have a tank spec where you turn into a big bear and you're doing your thing there. You have a healer where currently you play mostly kind of on your feet, but then you can occasionally turn into this tree of life thing where you run around. Being a tree is always fun. And then range damage where you turn into a moonkin, you look like a big chicken. Some people also call it a boomkin. And then you have melee damage, which is a cat form. They also have like travel forms. So you have instant, basically if you've ever played an MMO before and there's mounting where you can kind of hop onto a mount flying or ground, or even they can even swim faster. Druids have a travel form. They can always heal themselves. They're very hard to kill in PvP. I've always enjoyed Druid, so it's just a class that I personally have just been drawn to in pretty much every game that offers them. Demon Hunter is one of our newest classes. We do get new classes every other expansion. So we did not get one for BFA, so we'll get one next time. So with Legion, we got Demon Hunters. Demon Hunters are tanks or melee DPS. They are easily one of the more powerful classes in their roles from a utility standpoint. They can do a lot of things, and they can solo a lot of things that not every other class can do, depending on the content. So just because that tank and melee puts a lot together, and they move really fast, and a lot of their tanking, in my opinion, just feels like it comes from like the abilities they cast. And so, you know, the ability to like turn into a big demon and stuff like that is things that when they move into their melee DPS, any of that carries over just makes them surprisingly hard to kill for how light on their feet they are. Absolutely very, very fun. They remind me a lot in Legion, their strength and their prowess for the content and how well geared they were towards that content. And so maybe over time they'll feel more like everybody else. It feels a lot like the way Death Knight, our final class, felt in Wrath of the Lich King when it was introduced. Death Knights, keep in mind, some of these, like Demon Hunter and Death Knight, for example, you do not start at level 1. So you're going to start a little higher off. They weren't meant to be down there. So playing a Death Knight as your main, you're going to have options of tank or melee DPS. They have always been really interesting tanks to watch play, and in many expansions, it has either made them the best tank or like a must-have DPS class. In other pieces of content, maybe not so much. So we'll have to just see long-term kind of what that means. They were the first what's called hero class. So back in Lich King, they could do something really unique. They're just a big melee class. They just run around powering through things. Very fun to watch. The animations around them are incredible. So visually, I think they're very, very impressive. That's about it. So I know that was a very long video, literally just kind of running through kind of what the types are, what the classes are. Hopefully one or more of those jumped out at you and it's worth giving a trial to. Now, in my last video, I want to talk a little bit about kind of how different gameplay works within the game and how picking a class, how that's going to matter, so that if you're between a few here, that can maybe be the final deciding factor in exactly what class fits you best for World of Warcraft. This is the meatiest of the 3 videos, so definitely feel free to hit me up with comments down below. You guys feel free to start a discussion with anything I missed. I tried to talk quickly, but not too quickly, but I know that this is already running quite a bit longer than the other videos. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a blast in World of Warcraft, and this helps you pick either, you know, your very first class or your next class that you're going to play. Definitely let me know what you choose, and, you know, keep in mind that the class balances change, and over expansions they will change, so you want to pick a class that the core mechanics and the way it works and the way it's designed and how it feels and how it looks and just everything about like what makes it is what excites you. That way down the road, when it becomes a little more powerful or a little less powerful than something else, the things that attracted you to it are still there. So my name is Chris with Work to Game. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Hey, it's me. Thanks so much for watching this video. You should click over here to see more videos just like it, or you should click down here to check out our recent vlog. But you can also click somewhere down here below to hit the subscribe button, as well as check out our other info. Again, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.